Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and we're joined this evening by a friend of mine who hasn't been on the show for a couple of years, and we'll be looking for an update from her, Debbie Bacigalupi. She's a rancher, she's an entrepreneur, out there as an activist, getting the community riled up about the right things. Debbie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. So
for those that don't know you, and that's probably relatively few, but tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in the fight. Specifically, we're going to be talking this evening about water.
Yeah.
How'd you get involved and why is it personal?
Well, it's very personal because my family, I'm sixth generation cattle ranching family in California. And as you know, water is vital to our agriculture industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And as a cattle rancher's daughter, I'm seeing firsthand how the water situation, the Endangered Species Act, private property rights are really going at the heart of this country and at the heart of California. What put California on the map is agriculture. What put agriculture on the California map is water and our ability to move and divert water all over the state. So I've gotten into the fight. I ran for Congress in 2012 in the Bay Area in the 14th District. I was fighting regionalism, I was fighting the One Bay Area plan, but at the same time, I was there to represent the farmers and the ranchers who really have little to no voice anymore in California. We often, and it's sad, think, how did we who provide fiber and food to the public, how did we all of a sudden become the enemies of, and that's what we feel like. We feel, especially as a cattle rancher, because we are landowners, and in order to have cow or cattle or livestock, you need to have quite a bit of land, and we have grass-fed, natural grazing cows on 4,500 acres up above Mount Shasta. And what's going on up there, and I know we'll talk about it, is the government and tribes trying to come in and destroy dams, vital, clean, green hydroelectric dams, and which will impact my family personally, but that's not why I'm in this fight. I'm in this fight because I, as someone who is single and doesn't have children, I have not lots of time on my hands, but I have a passionate drive to protect the freedoms and the liberties that we've been given here in this country. I think that California is the pilot program for many destructive processes or destructive regulations or destructive agendas in the future. And you know, I hope to be on this earth for quite a bit longer. And Chris, the fight is so important because it involves everyone. This is not a left-right issue. This is an American freedom issue. This is if you want to be an entrepreneur, we used to be Americans, and I think today we're facing being Americans. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't go here, you can't drive here, you can't drive this. And here in the Bay Area, what's coming under the One Bay Area plan is complete control, monitoring, and surveilling of practically every aspect of our life. So it impacts me, it impacts my friends, it impacts you, it impacts everyone. And, in my lifetime, I want to be happy. I want to be successful. I want to be able to, be an entrepreneur. And what I see happening in California, that is not going to be the case, in the near future. Not what I see coming down. Well,
and you've used words as you were speaking there, such as agenda or as Plan Bay Area and that kind of thing. And one of the things that we've talked about in the past, a lot of times it's called sustainable development or that kind of thing, but some people are uncomfortable with the term Agenda 21. But you see a correlation between the things happening in both of the places where you call home, here in the Bay Area, with Plan Bay Area, and up in Siskiyou County where your family's property is located. People say they're so far apart. How could any of that be related? It's just coincidence, you're paranoid. Tell us a little bit about why you think that they're a common issue.
Well, and I've been to the Rio Earth Summit. I went to the United Nations Sustainable Development Conference in 2012. So I saw, like I'm seeing firsthand, what's happening to farmers and ranchers and landowners here in California. I saw firsthand their agenda. They are being United Nations, non-government organizations like the Sierra Club, the Center for Biological Diversity, Greenpeace. Their agenda is a radical environmental agenda, which involves the water.
Right.
And so it's about a fragile earth. It's about precious, finite water. It's about precious, finite resources.
Right.
And the impact that a population has on a fragile earth.
Right.
The natural resources are regarded as vital to a healthy environment, healthy ecosystem, and it's true.
Right.
It's true. But what is being represented, or I'd say misrepresented out there, is that we human beings, especially cattle ranchers, somehow are so destructive to this earth that we are looking at in the 21st century, unless we change our behavior right now.
Right.
We are looking at, according to a growing number, including the Pope, including Mitt Romney, including Jeb Bush, including Lindsey Graham, including Al Gore and Bill Clinton and John Kerry and all these talking heads.
Well, thank you for using a word that we can air.
That they're pushing this agenda. What they're pushing for is what's called COP21. COP21 is conventions of party. And COP21 is happening in Paris. What's happening? And it's the end of this year. So all of these governments, whether they signed on to the Kyoto Protocol or not, which was about climate change, and then our cities and our counties and our mayors all throughout the United States have adopted the Kyoto Protocol. Well, what's the next step? COP21, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change meeting, the 21st meeting, and it's in Paris. And what the plan is to come up with a global plan. In other words, a global governance plan to figure out how all global economies, developing countries, industrialized countries like the United States, can come together on a climate action plan to reduce the future raising of the environment temperature of 2 degrees. And also to come up with a global price on carbon.
Right.
Carbon, water is carbon. Everything we touch has carbon in it. So what we're looking at, and the way that they're pushing this, the way that they're moving us into this crisis, is like this water crisis.
Oh, but it ultimately comes down to control. And you talked about the consolidation. A lot of these people are very nihilistic and believe humans are evil and we've got to wipe humans off the face of the planet. We're seeing things, the attack on cattle ranchers, where in California I've been hearing more and more about how they're looking at trying to, because it requires less water, replacing the protein we get from beef with ground crickets, as an example, because it's much friendlier to the environment, requires less water. I'm not eating crickets. Those are for our geckos. I'm
sure they taste good with chocolate, which takes water, though.
Well, yeah, and plants and other things. But what's interesting is we're going to talk about specifically the water basis for it, but it's obviously a hot topic, and it is about control.
Yeah.
Right? And you've seen firsthand how if we really cared about things like green energy, if we cared about things like clean water and people having a standard of living and everything else, we would have things left in place like the dams in Siskiyou County. Yes. But that's actually not what's going on. They're actually trying to remove those things.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about how that goes and kind of it's almost like upside down world.
It is. And great segue, because the agenda for the 21st century is dams are considered unsustainable.
As are livestock, as are humans generally.
As are skiing, because you have to cut down trees. So most human activity, unless it's highly concentrated in a high density, multimodal, area like the One Bay Area Plan, or now it's called Plan 2040. They've changed the name.
That's the third time that they've done this.
They've got to keep changing the name to keep people distracted from what the real agenda is,
Right.
which is to take us out of the country, take us out of the rural areas, and have us all living in concentrated, high-density living situations. Because
Mao did the opposite. Didn't he put all the peons out in the country? Was it how that worked? And then he starved them out there? Isn't that? Anyway,
yeah,
I digress.
Maybe. but when you're about protecting the environment, and most of the environment happens out like on my parents' cattle ranch, which is spectacular, by the way.
Right.
We've got water, we've got adjudicated riparian water rights that are pre-1914, and now Jerry Brown is going after those water rights. He's gone after the groundwater in this bill, Prop 1, which most people voted for, unfortunately. It even talks about how dam removal is a part of it. In here it's talking about
not building dams so we have more water, but removing them, which is going to fix the water crisis. How?
Right, well, it's not going to fix the water crisis.
Because that's what people thought they were voting for, right?
They thought this was about water storage. And in fact, it's the opposite. So what they have to do, like here on page 13, if somebody wants to look at the Prop 1, it says, fulfill the obligations of the state of California in complying with the terms of multi-party settlement agreements. What's a multi-party settlement agreement? Well, Merced River restoration was a multi-party settlement agreement. So Debbie, what does that mean?
Right.
Merced River runs through Yosemite. If you look at the EIR-EIS, which I have one of the binders here.
Which is an environmental impact report.
And environmental impact study.
Right.
Of Merced River restoration. You see things no matter what alternative they choose to restore the Merced River, the ice skating rink comes out. The historic ice skating rink way away from the river. What does that have to do with river restoration? Bike rental, gone. What does that have to do with river restoration?
It's about not having people on the lands.
I think so. When you look at the agenda, the environmental agenda, it is to remove people out of areas where we have natural resources, where there's wildlife. And this is the same situation with the river systems. So why are we destroying dams when we need more high storage lakes? Mm-hmm. Because of fish.
Right.
In the case of where my parents are, the Klamath River Basin, which is just below the Oregon border, it's above Mount Shasta, it's gorgeous, gorgeous territory. What we're dealing with is the Klamath River Basin. Now, the Klamath River starts in low-level lakes in Oregon, southern Oregon. These are high phosphorus lakes. If you look at the topography of the Siskiyou County and the Shasta area, it's very volcanic. So phosphorus is great for irrigating. So phosphorus, these are low-level warm lakes. They are not good. It's not a good environment for salmon. Salmon prefer cold, fresh water or ocean water. So when they come up the ocean to spawn a couple times a year, why they come up is they get a flush of cold water. They know that the season's changing and it's time to go back home. Mm-hmm. Well, on the Klamath River, there are a series of 4 dams, hydroelectric, clean, green, renewable energy dams that are up for removal by the federal government, by the State Department of Fish and Game. Now it's Fish and Wildlife, and that is no coincidence, right, because it's not about game anymore.
Because that would allow hunting, and you can't allow hunting.
It's about protecting wildlife. Right. It's about protecting species. Well, their pet project species, just like the spotted owl, is what we call the coho salmon.
Right.
It's not, you can buy the coho salmon in Whole Foods for like $8.99 a pound. But most people don't prefer coho salmon because it's not that tasty of a fish.
Right.
But it is used for tribal ceremonies. So what the plan is under what is called, and I'm going to just get into a bunch of jargon and just bear with because people need to know, it's called the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement and the Klamath Hydro Settlement Agreement. The federal government, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, including Jerry Brown, including our own California Air Resource Board, Mary Nichols, all these people want to see these dams removed. Now you would think...
Do they hate clean energy?
They hate something. And I don't think it's clean energy.
Humans?
I think their clean energy is their gemstone for being super, super rich. Because as they push clean energy, they are also investing in clean energy. But regardless of their clean energy movement or not, they want these dams removed because of coho salmon is their pet project fish. Now you talked about, don't we want a cleaner environment? Behind all these dams is over 20 million cubic yards of sediment, pollutants that have built up over 100 years of ecosystem if you combine all the dams. Those, when they breach the dams, which is what the government, both state and federal governments plan with our taxpayer dollars, by the way. When they breach those dams, all that sediment will go 187 miles at least, because the first dam closest to the river is 187 miles upstream. So you're now talking about sediment, 20 million which is something like several times around the earth or something. Don't quote me on the number. It's been a long time since I've talked about that number. But it's something like, anyway, it's
astronomical.
12,000 miles, something like that. When they breach the dams and that sediment starts oozing its way out to sea, oh, by the way, and if the seas are rising because of global warming and climate change, when we want to hold back water, so it does not make sense that we are a state who is in a 4th year, supposedly historic drought. But you can look back and see that back in the 1800s, they said, oh my gosh, it's a historic drought. And then the next year was followed by, floods. And San Joaquin Valley flooded. And they could use river boats to cruise around in the San Joaquin Valley. So the Klamath River, the goal, and it's in here because the Klamath River is also a multi-party settlement agreement. And it says right here in Prop 1, so even though we were told, no, Prop 1 is all about storage. No, it's about habitat restoration. It's about conservation. It's about removing fish barriers. What's a fish barrier? A dam. A dam is a fish barrier. Because fish, unless there's a ladder or a fish bypass tunnel or something that, or truck and haul, which is what we do with the Delta smelt. We truck and haul that to high storage lakes.
Well, that's called like mass transit. So it's okay.
It's multimodal. Yes. So we have the issue.
It's a school bus for fish.
Yeah. We have the issue going on in the Klamath, which most people do not know about. If and when, and we are fighting hard in Siskiyou County. And we even had a Measure G a couple years ago. I think it was in 2010, where over almost 80% of the Siskiyou County population, the voting population, voted no to removing those dams. But the government does not care what the people want. So if they remove these dams, and right now there are all sorts of states are getting involved, when quite frankly it's none of their business. It's none of their business. The hydroelectric dam, the dams provide over 70,000 homes with clean, green, inexpensive energy. What people are now seeing, oh, by the way, the dams are owned by Warren Buffett. And he owns a electric company called Pacific Power. And what people are now starting to see on their bills, their power bills, is, I don't know if it's $2 a month, but something around that number, for dam removal. So you have people who are protesting, who are saying...
And they're being charged for the thing to be removed that they asked not to be removed.
We are, yes.
Good times.
And scientists, federal scientists from the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Reclamation, have been fired, who are working on the Klamath River chaos or calamity, whatever you want to call it, for questioning the Department of Interior, the secretary, and that time it was Ken Salazar, now it's Sally Jewell, for questioning the numbers that they are putting out in press releases.
Because they know that they're inaccurate, and so if you start to make motions like you're going to blow a whistle, out you go. Kind of sounds like retribution.
Or you're moved to a different department. And in the case of Dr. Paul Hauser, H-O-U-S-E-R, he settled with the Department of Interior. They settled with him, rather. And he was not even protected under the whistleblower clause. So we are seeing junk science, like with the Drake's Oyster Bay. We're seeing junk science being used by the federal government for these radical agendas.
Right.
And how California is being impacted right now is all over water issues.
Well, and that science approach is also quite popular, it seems, within CARB generally.
Yes.
And so wanted to cover, you started to talk about the drought a little bit.
Yes.
And so you say 4th year of the drought and everything else, but are there ways that you see that we could mitigate this, or if the next flood or the next rains come, that we could capture some of this water and maybe mitigate the drought risks for the future?
Well, so under climate change, here's what's happening, and this is where people should be outraged. Right now, over just a few fish, whether it's the Delta smelt or the steelhead or the coho salmon,
right.
What's being done right now is massive flushing in our river systems. So the government is releasing out of these dams. So we have high storage lakes. Right now, all of our storage lakes, if our government had been planning for the future properly, those storage lakes should be full,
right.
or somewhat full.
Right.
They're not. You look at Folsom, you look at Shasta, you look at Oroville, you look at San Luis, you look at all these lakes, and they are critically low.
Right.
If we are heading, and the reason we planned for the future, as farmers and ranchers, the reason we plan for the future and conserve is because you never know what the weather's going to do. You could have 1 year of massive floods, and the next year could be completely dry.
Right.
For the next 7, you can have floods. But California is a naturally Mediterranean arid climate. The only reason we have cities like Los Angeles is because we were able to divert water.
Right.
The only reason we have agriculture in California in an arid land is because we diverted water.
Right.
Where do we get most of the water in California? Where's most of the snow? Where's most of the rain?
The mountains.
Yep, in the 1/3 of the state. And then you've got the population and the economy in the rest of the 2/3. So Northern California is where we get our water.
Right.
And then all that water, like for example Shasta, people in San Diego are getting their water out of Shasta Lake.
Travels the whole country, or the whole state.
Because we are able to use channels and aqueducts and canals and pump water and pump salt water out to the sea, so that we have this delta area that's the San Joaquin, that's this awesome farming community that's because of our water, we've created multi-billion-dollar year-over-year industries. Hollywood, agriculture, biotech, high tech, all these industries here in California.
Right.
Why? Because we moved water.
Right.
So,
but we're not doing it efficiently, right? We've only got a couple minutes left, just giving you the 2-minute warning. But we're not doing it efficiently. There are places we could save water, reduce waste, that kind of thing, right?
Right. Right. And we should be conserving. We should always be conserving. But you know what? I don't know if the proper thing, there's this new saying going around, brown is the new green.
Right.
To me, brown is death.
Right.
Brown is when you stop watering your lawn, it's dead. You're going to have to replace it.
Right.
It reduces the value of the property. And if government is wasting water, we're talking billions and billions and billions of gallons of water a day.
Right.
Some days.
Right.
Out to sea that could, feed 5.14 million families in a year of water. This is a man-made crisis. This is not a natural crisis. This has nothing to do with climate change. This has nothing to do with global warming. This has everything to do with our government and environmental groups who sue and settle, mismanaging our water, taking it away from the people. And you always hear this 80-20 rule. 80% of water goes to agriculture, 20% to the rest of us. That is a flat-out misnomer.
Right.
Because over 50.2% of the water and snowpack goes to the environment.
Right.
Agriculture gets about 40.9%, and then 20% or 10%, 8 to 10% goes to urban municipal use.
Right.
And so what the government did in 1992 is add a third straw to our water system. Right. It used to be agriculture, municipal, and industrial, those two things, and then agriculture, and then they added the environmental straw.
Right.
The environmental straw gets 50%, and you never hear about that.
Well, there's a lot more content that I know you could cover. Is there any way that people can get a hold of you or find out some of the things you're researching and doing?
Sure. You know what? There's a great website. It's not mine. It's a friend of mine, Aubrey Betancourt.
Okay.
She's just a fascinating woman. Her website is CaliforniaWaterAlliance.org.
Okay.
And that's a fabulous water, to get facts about our water situation.
Okay, great. Well, we'll have people go there. Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
If you hold on for just a moment, we'll be back after a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum. He actually went a little over. Great stuff. I know you.
Was I too, like...
The Conservative Forum of Silicon Valley began with 20 conservatives meeting at a restaurant in November of 2003. Our mission is to promote the principles of American liberty through education. By 2012, we had grown to over 600 paid members. Our monthly meetings feature well-known and prestigious conservative speakers addressing issues that are critical to our country's very survival. This includes speakers like Victor Davis Hanson, Andrew Breitbart, David Horowitz, and many others. In addition to our monthly meetings, we sponsor a conservative local cable access TV show, The Right Side, covering today's topics. Our Constitution discussion group not only teaches the Constitution, but started our annual essay contest that awards 2 $1,000 scholarships to local high school seniors. We are a virtual clearinghouse for grassroots organizations by providing them with table space at no charge in our exhibit area. There are typically a dozen groups represented. If you are like-minded, join us at our next meeting and become motivated and empowered. Liberty, made in America.
And welcome back to The Right Side. That was a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum. And while we appreciate them making the show possible, what they're really known for is their speaker series. And that happens at 432 Stearland Road at the IFES Portuguese Hall here in Mountain View, about 3 minutes away, usually on the second Tuesday of each month around 7. This evening, here in June, Jim Garrity from National Review Online will be present. In August, Gert Wilders will be speaking. He is internationally known as being a Dutch politician, a strong advocate for the stop of the Islamization of the Netherlands. And in November, Kurt Schlichter, Army Colonel, trial lawyer, and national commentator for Fox News, Dennis Miller, Hugh Hewitt, and other shows, will be speaking at the forum. For more information, you can reach out to theconservativeforum.com and get all the information you need. In closing, believe Debbie? Don't believe Debbie? I can tell you that she's literally traveled internationally in her fight to understand the truth about the Agenda 21 program, global warming, its impacts, but she's heavily involved not only on a personal level fighting in Siskiyou County and here in the Bay Area. She sought nationally as a speaker to really educate people on what's happening and is considered an expert in the field. So reach out to her, track her down on Google, YouTube, and other places, and you'll see that she knows her stuff. And then research for yourself, and you'll find that she's pretty accurate to the point of being scary. But on that note, we'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. This has been The Right Side. I've been your host, Chris Pareja, and I'll look forward to seeing you sometime soon, either on the show or in person. But if you just can't wait, reach out to us at therightsidetv@gmail.com, and we'll get your answers to questions that you might have as quickly as we can. Thanks, and have a great night.